Welcome to the first in a series of presentations where we're going to be looking at the Book of Ecclesiastes, the search for meaning in life. And he declares all is meaningless. The Book of Ecclesiastes. It's a book centered around wisdom. And yet sometimes in our struggle for wisdom and understanding, it's like peering through a fog. And indeed sometimes we hit a brick wall. It's a dead end, or we're struggling just to keep ourselves afloat in life. Life sometimes appears to be just a crumpled mess. And it all finishes in the grave. Game over, the end. The search for meaning. But it raises the question, and the writer of this book addresses this question, what's life all about? Can we make any sense of life? Is there any meaning? It's a search for meaning. We sometimes sit and we're puzzled. The road ahead seems uncertain. We don't know where it's going. We can't see the answers. Everything just puzzles us. Does life have any purpose? We look out in the world and we have to ask why? Why so much suffering? Why is life so unpredictable? And is death the end? Is there nothing beyond death? We're born, we live, we die, and then we're forgotten. And is there such a thing as right and wrong? Or we just have to talk it through and see what's the best opinion. And so often in life we miss justice and fairness. Where is it? Is it just all chance? Unpredictable chance? Or can we work it out in some way? We sit there and ask the questions, what if? And we often don't get the answers. The search for meaning in life. Here's some verses from this book. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Is that true? We like these verses. There's a time for everything, it says, and a season for every activity under the heavens. But if we look at them more closely, we realise that it's all just chance. Things come, things go, and there is no pattern. And he goes on to say, whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. It just cycles on. It repeats itself. No purpose, no progress, nothing. We're familiar with these words. He has also set eternity in the human heart. We like that, but we don't like the second half. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. We're aware of something beyond ourselves, but can't work it out though. And in the end, we all go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. The grave is the end for all. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. We have to leave it all behind. And there are more quotations. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Do we really believe that? Can it possibly be true? This is quoted out of context so often. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. We spiritualize it away. All the author is saying is that on your own you won't make it. 2 people, better chance. But 3, we can survive. But that's true. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. How true that one is. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. Do we believe we all share the same destiny, irrespective of how we've lived and what we've done? That's what the book says. Again, this is so often quoted out of context. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come. But the latter part gives us the clue. Because we look at the context, what the writer is saying is simply this. When you get old, you won't be able to do everything you did when you were young. So live life to the full when you're young. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favour to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Do we really believe that time and chance rule our lives? That it's all just one great lottery? This book is full of puzzles, confusions. We can see it as a puzzle, and it's so difficult to disentangle and make any sense of it. The puzzle of this book, Ecclesiastes. Why on earth is it even in the Bible? What has it got to say to us? Has it got any purpose? Who wrote the book? And why was it written? When? And for whom? It's full of things that contradict each other within the book. The writer is struggling to make sense of life. And there are things in the book that contradict other parts of the Bible. Why? Is it relevant for us today? Indeed, why is it in our Bibles at all? The puzzle of Ecclesiastes, and I'm going to address some of these questions as we go through this book. I want to focus on the top three for the moment. The others will become more apparent as we move on. Who, why, when? The writer is described, and I put in a transliteration of the Hebrew word, Kohelet. The word is an ordinary Hebrew word. It's not a special name, it's not a proper name. And it just describes someone who kind of assembles other people together, gathers a crowd around them, if you like. Some have suggested that it could be King Solomon that compiled the book. But I want to show that is highly unlikely. In fact, it's so unlikely we can dismiss it. All we know is it's someone who is described as Kohelet, a speaker, one who gathered people around him. But clearly, the author is a person of great intellectual ability. He's looking out in life, or maybe it's a she, looking out in life, reflecting on what they see. But what do they see? What does this person see? That from the standpoint of intellectual thought and ability, from the human perspective, the conclusion he comes to is, it's all meaningless. There's no meaning in life. Purposeless. Very often this person has been described in the older versions as a teacher or a preacher. Now these are unfortunate translations. It's just somebody who gathered people around him and perhaps just talked to them. And it's very difficult to know when it was written. Sometimes something in the book gives it away, but not in this book. There's no historical events really recorded. Sometimes the language structure and style gives it away, but that's uncertain as well. So it's sometime during the period about 900 to 400 BC. So it's the time of the Jewish nation, perhaps the nation when it came back after exile. Let's look at some of the references that have made people think it might be Solomon, and I want to show it couldn't be. He's introduced as the beginning as Kohelet. That's just an ordinary word, a description. Son of David, king in Jerusalem. Described as a king over Israel in Jerusalem. That makes not too much sense. Jerusalem was in Judah. Son of David just could be someone who's a descendant. Son of doesn't mean literally the son of. Kohelet seems like a nickname or a pseudonym, and that perhaps gives us the clue. He's described in the book as someone who was a king. Now, Solomon was a king from his coronation to the day he died. At no point could Solomon look back in his life and say, I was a king. He died in post. Speaks about, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. The problem is, only one person ever ruled in Jerusalem before Solomon. That was David, because David was the first to capture Jerusalem. So it doesn't make sense. And it certainly suggests it's not Solomon. The book speaks of oppression, with no one able to sort out the oppression, the lack of justice. Now, Solomon was king, and a very powerful king. He had the power to sort all that out. So why would he write about it? But in fact, he himself exploited his people. Doesn't fit. It speaks of a lack of justice in the court system, and actually says the increase from the land is taken by all, and then the king himself profits from the fields. In other words, the king was taking his cut. How could Solomon have written that? There are many pointers like these throughout the book that certainly undermine any possibility that Solomon was the author of this book. So who was it? Let's look at Solomon for a moment. If we look at the end of his life, chapter 11 of 1 Kings, it describes reflecting on Solomon, the end of his life. Not a good picture. Solomon disobeyed God. He married many foreign princesses. He built pagan temples all over the land. It's described. That doesn't fit the book. And God expresses his great displeasure in what Solomon's been up to. And he reveals that the kingdom of Solomon would break into two. It also shows that various rulers from the countries round about were getting together, ganging up. They were waiting for Solomon to topple over and die. They were going to get revenge. And Jeroboam, who was one of King Solomon's top managers, it describes how he started to plot sedition against the king. None of this fits the actual book of Ecclesiastes. Now, King Solomon gets wind of it. He tries to kill Jeroboam, but he escapes and he flees to Egypt. Eventually he comes back and he takes over the northern half of the land. Yes, Solomon had enormous wisdom. He was very wealthy, but much came from taxation and exploitation. Look at the comments of his son. He went in for pagan marriages on the big scale. He built pagan temples all over the place. and some of them practiced things that were really bad, including child sacrifice. The seeds of destruction were in the land, and chapter 11 of Kings shows it. You can't keep disobeying the best in life, and what God wants is the best in life, without there being consequences. And the kingdom did split shortly after his death. A king like that could never have constructed this book, and it could never have said what is said in the book. So we're back to the puzzle of Ecclesiastes. So many unanswered questions, but there is an answer. There are other books, not in the Bible, but other books that are similar. It's a type of literature. And when we look at other books that exist about that period of time, you can see that it's a type of literature that's known as fictional autobiography. Sounds a complicated description. Somebody who just calls himself a gatherer of people is arguing, well, if Solomon couldn't find satisfaction and meaning in life, what hope have we? So he's taking the name, and it's not dishonest, it's a style of writing. It's fictional, pretending he's somebody else. And he adopts the pseudonym of Solomon, son of David. And there are a number of books that form this style. You write something, and in humility you don't put your name against it. You take the name of somebody who's long gone, who's dead. And it's a sign of respect for them. But in this case, it's not only a sign of respect for Solomon's great abilities intellectually, but the recognition that Solomon messed up. He didn't find the meaning in life. And the consequences were that the kingdom split in two. Now that starts to make sense. Fictional autobiographies. A later author places his own words in the mouth of another more famous individual. It's a style of writing. And it fits that style beautifully. But in that style of writing and in this book, there's a prologue and an epilogue. And in fact, that gives it away. The prologue introduces it, it's written by somebody else. It's like a preface in a book today. But the epilogue, the final section, interprets and comments on the words that have been spoken throughout the book. And it's that gives us the clue, the comments at the end. So the book's got three parts. A very short bit at the end is a prologue, a preface, an introduction written by somebody else. And you can see from the style of writing it's written by somebody else. Then the whole of the book. All the things that Kohelet, the gatherer of people, the speaker, had said. It's his autobiographical speech, or speeches. He's thinking on his feet, searching for meaning. And he goes up in all sorts of directions, and they're not always consistent. It makes complete sense. If you're searching for meaning, thinking on your feet, just talking out loud, speculating. That's what the book is doing. And then the last few verses at the end of the book, the editor comes back with an epilogue and comments. And the comments make sense of what the book's all about. Now with that in mind, let's see if we can make some sort of sense of the book. For many today throughout the world, and this may be true of you, life just may seem to be a crumpled mess. The circumstances that have surrounded us have messed us up, or perhaps we've taken bad decisions and we're living with them. We don't see the point and purpose of it. Meaningless, meaningless. All is meaningless. That summarizes the book. And the word that's translated meaningless, a possible way of looking at it is the word frustration. We can't make sense of what life's all about. We're frustrated. We don't know which way to turn or what to do. We start a round of work. There are a few pleasures on the way. Doesn't seem to be any fairness in life. It all seems to be chance. And for all of us, it ends in a grave. That's the picture that Kohelet has given to us, where chance and unpredictability seem to rule everything. There doesn't seem to be rhyme nor reason. There doesn't seem to be logic, justice, or fairness. What's it all about? No meaning, no hope. And as this speaker, this Kohelet, this gatherer of people, speaking out his mind and talking through possibilities, clearly somebody of great intellectual ability, he looks out and he can't make sense. This book speaks to our age. You see, no matter how clever we are, and we human beings are clever, look at what we have created and invented in the history of the world. Yes, we are clever. But life doesn't make much sense if we look at it in cold logic. It's not easy to see a purpose in living. It's very difficult to explain the suffering in the world. And how do we decide what's right and wrong? In the West today, it's decided almost by a vote. The majority agree that this is okay. Therefore we do it, and we pass a law to say it's okay. Is that really the answer? In many countries of the world, they are ruled by injustice, corruption, and those who can pay the best lawyers win in the court cases, and the majority suffer with no redress. But in the West, it's not that much better. It's just a bit more sophisticated. And many people have asked that question. What happens? Is it just a gravestone and bye? Gone? Forgotten? Finished? Life moves on. Without God in the equation of our lives, life makes little sense. But Kohelet accepts that there is a God, and a God who made everything. So there has to be something more than that. How do we make sense of life? How do we tackle the search for meaning? This book speaks to our modern age, where things are often not clear. We've lost the landmarks. We've lost the purpose and direction. This book speaks to our age. And in life today, the landmarks of meaning are being erased. We've got the great power blocks in the world. We've got communism. Not many countries left like that. But the ruling elite determine everything. And those who won't conform, you have little chance. The landmarks of meaning have been decided by an inner elite group. There are regimes that are totalitarian, where everything centres around one person, usually a man, who's arranged things to get into permanent, perpetual power, who can do what they like, and they take the wealth and resources, and for the rest, life has little meaning, little future, and little hope. Just surviving is tough enough. In the Islamic world, the landmarks of meaning are very strongly etched out, laid down by religious leaders. Anyone who doesn't conform, you've got a problem. You may end up in prison, a loss of livelihood, losing your children, tortured or executed. And the ordinary folk have little chance. But are these landmarks of Islam meaningful? Do they make sense? Do they fit the evidence? Very doubtful. And in the West, political correctness is steadily eroding the landmarks of meaning. Right and wrong is no longer clear-cut. The principles of life have gone. Expediency, protecting the vested interests of minorities. All of that seems to rule today. And for the ordinary folk, the vast majority, doesn't matter what the culture or context is, the situation is often the same. The confidence in the students are declining. People are not sure what it's all about. We're not giving a clear steer to people in running their lives. Sadly, the clear message of Christian people is muted, confused. It is not clear. The landmarks of meaning have been erased. The search for meaning, this book speaks to our age. So what do people do? They just live for the moment in a desperate struggle for happiness and meaning. They struggle to get a living, to provide for families, and have a reasonable lifestyle. If they live in a poor developing country, it's tough, living hand to mouth. If you live in the West, with a welfare state, it's much easier. But it's just a struggle to make something of life. What's the meaning? What's the purpose? The search for meaning.